Sheik sees pregnant woman about to give birth with vultures waiting, then he does this. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you like my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The golden Lamborghini Huracan cut through the hot West Texas air like a blade, kicking up clouds of red dust that vanished into the infinite horizon of cotton fields. Ethan Al-Mansouri pressed the accelerator harder than necessary, trying to leave behind not just the miles of highway, but also the suffocating boredom of another meeting about investments in American agribusiness. At 35, he carried the weight of being the heir to one of the largest oil fortunes in the Middle East. But he had chosen the United States as his refuge, far from the family pressures and arranged marriages his family insisted on imposing as if they were business contracts. The mansion in Dallas was filled with empty luxury, surrounded by billion-dollar deals and superficial relationships that never touched his soul, hardened by loneliness. Ethan lived in a gilded cage where every decision was calculated, every relationship measured by interest, each day a repetition of the last. On that sweltering December afternoon, he had decided to take a shortcut down a dirt road just to feel something different, anything to break the monotony of his predictable existence. That's when he saw her. Ethan slammed on the brakes so hard the car nearly flipped, raising a curtain of dust that momentarily obscured his vision. When the cloud settled, the scene that unfolded before him was like a punch to the gut, something so brutal and unexpected that for a few seconds he doubted his own eyes. A young woman, clearly pregnant and at the end of her term, was tied to an isolated tree by the roadside. Her simple clothes were torn and stained with blood, and vultures circled around her, some already on the ground, pecking at her bloodied legs as she tried to defend herself with weak, desperate movements. The expression on her face was one of pure determination mixed with terror, as if she were fighting off despair with the last drop of strength she had left. Ethan stumbled out of the car, his heart pounding erratically. He was no one's hero. He had always solved his problems with lawyers and money, never with his own hands. But something in that woman's expression, in the way she lifted her chin, even while bound and vulnerable, awakened in him a primitive fury he had never felt before. "Get out of here, go!" he yelled at the vultures, waving his arms and running toward the tree. The birds reluctantly took flight, squawking as if protesting the interruption of their macabre meal. The young woman looked up at him, and Ethan felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. Even in the midst of that suffering, there was a light in her eyes that contrasted brutally with the darkness of the situation. She didn't ask for help, didn't cry, just looked at him as if trying to understand if he was real or just a hallucination caused by the pain. "Easy. I'm going to get you out of here," Ethan murmured, pulling a Swiss Army knife from his pocket and cutting the ropes that bound her wrists to the tree. His hands trembled as he worked, not just from the urgency, but from the rage that was building inside him like a volcano about to erupt. Who would do this to a pregnant woman? What kind of monster would be capable of such cruelty? "My name is Sarah," she whispered when she was freed, nearly collapsing into his arms. "Sarah Miller. They said it was for my father to learn his lesson." "My what lesson? Who did this to you?" Ethan's voice came out harsher than he intended, laden with an anger he didn't even know he possessed. "The men from J.D. Kane," she managed to say between moans of pain. "He wants my father's land, and oh God, I think the baby is coming." Ethan carried her in his arms to the car, feeling how light she was despite her advanced pregnancy, as if she hadn't eaten properly for days. As he settled her into the passenger seat, he noticed the details of her face for the first time. Delicate features that carried an impressive inner strength, dark brown hair stuck to her forehead with sweat, and those eyes that seemed to hold an unshakable determination even in the face of the most extreme suffering. "Where's the nearest hospital?" he asked, starting the car and flooring the accelerator. "Abilene, but it's far." "Ah!" Sarah bent over as a stronger contraction hit her, her hands gripping the leather seat as if it were her only anchor to reality. Ethan drove like a man possessed over the dirt roads, then onto the highways, ignoring speed traps and limits. Along the way, Sarah told her story between groans of pain. She was a nurse, having graduated with great sacrifice, and had returned home to help her family resist the pressures of Jedediah J.D. Kane, a corrupt land baron who used violence and intimidation to expand his properties. Her father, George Miller, was an honest, small-time farmer who refused to sell the land that had been in their family for generations. "They caught me when I was coming back from the clinic," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. "They said I would serve as an example, that they would let the vultures eat me alive so my father could see what happens to those who don't obey the Baron." The fury growing in Ethan's chest was something new, visceral, different from any anger he had ever felt in corporate battles or family conflicts. As he held one of Sarah's hands, which squeezed his with superhuman strength during each contraction, he made a silent promise. Whoever had done this to her would pay dearly, very dearly. At the regional hospital in Abilene, Ethan used all his power and influence to ensure Sarah received the best care available. He stayed by her side throughout the entire labor, holding her hand as she screamed in pain, whispering words of encouragement in Arabic that she didn't understand, but which calmed her inexplicably. "Habibi, you are strong, stronger than you can imagine," he would murmur, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. "Your baby is almost here." "What does that mean, Habibi?" she asked between contractions, trying to focus on something other than the pain. "It means, darling, you are very brave." When little Yasmin was finally born, healthy and strong, Ethan looked into Sarah's eyes and saw a purity and strength that contrasted brutally with the futility of his gilded world. She cried with relief and joy, holding her daughter in her arms as if she were the most precious treasure in the universe, and he felt something move inside his cold chest, something he had believed to be dead for years. "Thank you," she said, looking directly into his eyes. "You saved our lives. I don't even know your name." "Ethan," he replied, and for the first time in his life, he said his own name without carrying the full weight of the Al-Mansuri family with it. Just Ethan. Sarah smiled, a tired but genuine smile that lit up her face, marked by the exhaustion of childbirth. "Ethan. It's a nice name. Arabic?" He just nodded, not wanting to go into details about his origin. In that moment, in the eyes of this incredible woman who had just given birth under such dramatic circumstances, he was just Ethan, not the billionaire heir, not the powerful businessman, just a man who had done the right thing at the right time. In the days that followed, as Sarah and Yasmin recovered in the hospital, Ethan stayed close, ensuring they wanted for nothing. He stayed in a simple motel in town, something completely different from his usual routine of presidential suites and five-star services, but strangely satisfying. He visited the hospital every day, bringing simple flowers, fresh fruit, and spent hours talking with Sarah about her dreams and plans for the future. It was during one of these conversations that Ethan began to understand the scale of what they were facing. Sarah told him about the constant threats her family received, about the economic pressure J.D. Kane exerted through banks and suppliers, about how hard it was to maintain dignity when you had so little and faced so much. She also spoke about Yasmin's father, a young farmhand who had died in an accident a few weeks before her birth, leaving her alone to face not only motherhood, but also the war that had been waged on her family. "I don't know what we'll do when I get out of here," she confessed one afternoon, rocking Yasmin as the golden late afternoon light streamed through the hospital window. Dad is there alone, and I know Kane's men won't stop. They've proven they're capable of anything. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He could resolve this whole situation with a few phone calls, using his political and economic power to crush Jedediah Kane like an insect. But that would expose his true identity and possibly put Sarah in even greater danger. Instead, he made a decision that surprised even himself. "I have a proposal," he said, choosing each word carefully. "I'm a businessman from Dallas, working with investments in the region. How about I rent a house in your town for a few weeks? I could get a better feel for the business opportunities and at the same time, be nearby in case you need help." Sarah looked at him with an expression of surprise and something that might have been the beginning of cautious hope. "You would do that? But why?" Ethan took her hand, feeling for the first time in years the real weight of a choice that didn't involve money or power, but just the deep desire to do the right thing. Because sometimes life puts special people in our path, and it would be foolish to waste the chance to get to know them better. The smile that lit up Sarah's face at that moment was like the sunrise after the most violent storm, and Ethan knew, with absolute certainty, that his life had just changed forever. The small house Ethan rented in the town of Red Rock Springs was a world away from everything he knew. Simple drywall, basic furniture, a tiny kitchen where two people could barely fit. For a man accustomed to imported marble and elaborate gardens in his Dallas mansion, that place should have been a devastating culture shock. Instead, he discovered a strange sense of peace he had never experienced in his golden palaces. Sarah returned home a week after giving birth, carrying Yasmin in her arms as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. Ethan accompanied her to the Miller family property, a small ranch with dairy cattle and cornfields that seemed frozen in time. The house was humble but clean, surrounded by a garden of wildflowers and a yard where chickens pecked freely among fruit trees. George Miller, Sarah's father, was a man in his late 50s, with hands calloused by hard work and eyes that held the wisdom of someone who had weathered many storms. When Ethan introduced himself as a businessman interested in local investments, the man welcomed him with the genuine hospitality of country folk, but with the natural suspicion of someone who had learned the hard way that not all outsiders arrived with good intentions. "So you're the man who saved my daughter," George said, shaking Ethan's hand firmly. "I have no words to thank you. If it weren't for you, I would have lost them both." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, seeing the restrained emotion in the man's eyes. "Anyone would have done the same, Mr. Miller. I was just in the right place at the right time." "No, that's not true," Sarah intervened, adjusting Yasmin in her lap as she sat on the wooden porch. "A lot of people would have just driven by, pretended they didn't see. You stopped. You risked getting involved in problems that weren't yours. That says a lot about who you are." In the days that followed, Ethan established a routine he had never imagined possible. He woke up early, had breakfast at the local diner, a stark contrast to the elaborate buffets served by his staff, and spent his mornings visiting local farmers and ranchers, genuinely interested in understanding the challenges they faced. In the afternoons, he invariably found an excuse to stop by the Miller property, always bringing something useful: medicine for the cattle, improved seeds, or simply fresh fruit for Sarah. The daily interaction with her and little Yasmin transformed Ethan in ways he never thought possible. Accustomed to luxury and ostentation, he learned to find beauty in the simplicity of rural life. He watched, fascinated, as Sarah cared for her daughter with total dedication, how she sang softly to put her to sleep, how she managed to be both strong and gentle at the same time. There was a grace in her simplest movements, a natural wisdom that contrasted with the artificial sophistication of the women in his usual social circle. "You have a way with children," she commented one afternoon, smiling as she watched Ethan hold Yasmin with exaggerated care, as if she were made of crystal. "Do you have any kids?" "No," he replied, feeling a pang of melancholy. "I never found someone I wanted to build a real family with." Sarah looked at him with curiosity, noticing something in his voice that suggested untold stories. "And why not? A man like you, successful, educated, you must have women lining up." Ethan gave a small, humorless laugh. "You'd be surprised how many relationships are based solely on interest. When you have a certain financial success, it's hard to know if people like you or what you represent." "That must be terrible," she said softly, "to always live doubting people's intentions." "It is," he admitted, surprised by his own honesty. "That's why it's so refreshing to be here. You don't even know how much money I have in the bank, and yet you treat me like I'm someone special." Sarah blushed slightly. "That's because you are someone special, at least to me. It doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have." The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching engines. 3 pickup trucks kicked up dust on the dirt road, heading straight for the property. Ethan felt every muscle tense as he saw the men who got out of the vehicles. Heavy-set types, clearly armed, with the air of those accustomed to intimidating defenseless people. "Mr. Miller, where are you?" shouted the one who seemed to be the leader, a tall, thin man with a scar on his face. "J.D. Kane sent a message." George came out of the house, his face grim but firm. Sarah stood up quickly, clutching Yasmin to her chest, and Ethan instinctively positioned himself between her and the intruders. "What do you want here?" George asked, his voice controlled but tense. "Come on, Mr. Miller. You know very well what we want. The boss has been more than patient, 3 months' notice, and you're still being stubborn. Now patience has run out. I've already told you, I'm not selling. This land has been in my family for 3 generations. The man laughed, a nasty sound. "Oh, is that right? And your little girl there, how's she doing? I heard she had some trouble on the road the other day. What a shame, right? A young woman with a new baby. Bad things can happen." Ethan took a step forward, his voice low and dangerous. "I think you'd better leave. Now." The henchman looked at him with mockery. "And who are you, stranger? Sarah's new boyfriend. Look, buddy, you don't know what you're getting into. You better pack your things and go back where you came from before you get caught in the crossfire." "I'm serious," Ethan said, and there was something in his tone that made the smile die on the man's face. "Leave, now." For a moment, the tension was palpable. The henchmen exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the stranger's firm stance. But then the leader shrugged. All right. We don't want any trouble today. But listen here, Miller, the boss gave you 1 more week. 1 week. After that, there's no more civilized conversation. And next time, there won't be any stranger to save your daughter." They left, leaving a cloud of dust and threats in the air. Sarah was trembling, holding Yasmin so tightly the baby started to cry. Ethan hugged her without thinking, feeling how she fit perfectly in his arms, as if she were made to be there. "It's okay," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "I won't let anything happen to you." "How can you guarantee that?" she asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "There are so many of them. They have guns, they have money, they have influence, and we're just small farmers trying to survive." Ethan gently pushed her away, looking directly into her eyes. "Trust me, I know how to take care of the people who are important to me." That night, while Sarah put Yasmin to sleep, Ethan made a call on his satellite phone to a number in Dallas. The conversation was brief in Arabic, but the tone was unmistakable. He was giving orders, not asking for favors. When he hung up, he found Sarah in the kitchen making herbal tea. She offered him a cup, and they sat at the small wooden table, enveloped in the quiet intimacy of the rural night. "Ethan," she said softly, Can I ask you something? Of course. You're not just an ordinary businessman, are you? There's something more, something you're not telling me. He was silent for a long moment, struggling internally. Part of him wanted to tell her the whole truth, to reveal who he really was, the power he possessed. Another part feared it would change everything between them, that it would turn the genuine love he saw growing in her eyes into something calculating or intimidated. Let's just say I have resources. More than it seems, he said finally. But that doesn't change who I am here with you. Sarah nodded slowly. I don't know why, but I trust you. Ever since that road, since the moment you stopped to help me, I feel like I can trust you. And you can, he replied, taking her hand across the table. You always can. The touch lingered, and for the first time since they met, the tension between them was not of fear or worry, but of something much deeper and more dangerous. Ethan looked at Sarah's lips, she at his, and the air between them seemed electrified. I should go, he murmured, making no move to get up. You should, she agreed, also not moving. The kiss began softly, almost hesitantly, as if they were both testing unknown ground. But it quickly deepened, charged with all the accumulated tension, all the repressed desire, all the emotional connection that had grown between them. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. That shouldn't have happened, Sarah said, but there was no regret in her voice. No, Ethan agreed, but it did, and I don't regret it. She smiled, a shy yet luminous smile. Me neither. That night, Ethan returned to his rented house with his heart in turmoil and a certainty growing in his chest. He was falling in love with Sarah Miller, and it would change everything. For the first time in his life, he had found something worth fighting for, something that went far beyond money, power, or family obligations. He had found true love in the midst of chaos, and no matter how many obstacles he faced, he would not let anything or anyone destroy it. The days following the kiss were of an emotional intensity that Ethan had never experienced. The seemingly simple routine of the small town had turned into a delicate dance of approach and retreat, where every glance exchanged with Sarah carried the weight of unspoken promises and repressed desires. He woke up thinking of her, spent the day inventing excuses to show up at the miller's property, and fell asleep with the taste of her lips still burning in his memory. Sarah, for her part, fought against her own feelings with a determination that was rapidly crumbling. There was something about Ethan that went far beyond physical attraction. It was the way he held Yasmin with reverent care, the way he talked to her father as an equal, the way he looked at her not as an object of desire, but as a complete, strong, and respectable woman. Still, an insistent voice in her mind whispered questions she was afraid to ask. Who was this man, really? Where did so much money for investments come from? And why would someone so clearly sophisticated choose to stay in a small town, lost in the Texas countryside? The answer to some of these questions began to unfold one December morning when Ethan received a call that forced him to leave for a few hours. He only said he had business to take care of in Austin, but Sarah noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his voice changed when he answered the phone, speaking in a language she didn't recognize, but which sounded musical and ancient. What Ethan didn't tell her was that 3 armored cars with Dallas plates had arrived discreetly in town during the night. What he didn't mention was that the men waiting for him in a luxury hotel in the state capital were private security agents specialized in solving problems definitively and silently. The power he had kept hidden was beginning to mobilize like a silent war machine, investigating every move of Jedediah Kane, mapping his political connections, identifying his vulnerabilities. The reports have arrived from Dallas, Mr. Al-Mansouri. said Marcus, his head of security, a 40-year-old man with scars that told stories that would never be verbalized. Jedediah Kane has an estimated net worth of 80 million, but half of it comes from questionable activities, land grabbing, intimidation, bribery of public officials. We have documents that could completely destroy him. Ethan analyzed the papers with the cold expression he used in business. And the local authorities? Bought or intimidated. The sheriff is on a monthly retainer. The county judge owes old favors. But we have contacts in Austin and D.C. who can push for a federal investigation. No, Ethan said, surprising Marcus. No official investigations yet. I don't want this to splash back on the Miller family. I want discreet pressure, guaranteed protection for them, and Kane under constant surveillance. If he makes any move against Sarah or her father, I want to know immediately. Marcus raised an eyebrow. With all due respect, sir, it would be much simpler to resolve this the traditional way. A man like Kane has many enemies. Accidents happen. No! Ethan's voice cut through the air like a blade. I will not become like him. I want justice, not revenge. When he returned to Red Rock Springs late that afternoon, Ethan found the Miller property on high alert. George was pacing nervously in the yard. Sarah was holding Yasmin tighter than usual, and there was a tension in the air he recognized immediately. What happened? He asked, getting out of the car in a hurry. They came back, George said, his voice thick with suppressed anger. This time they brought tractors. They tore down the fence of the east pasture and took 15 head of cattle. Said it was a late fee for the time I'm taking to sell. Ethan felt the fury explode in his chest like a volcano. Did you call the sheriff? Sarah laughed humorlessly. What for? The sheriff will make some excuse, say there's no proof, that it could have been anyone. It's always like this. Not always, Ethan murmured, pulling out his phone. Excuse me. He walked away and made a quick call. The conversation was in English, fast and direct. When he returned, there was a determination in his eyes that made Sarah shiver. Tomorrow morning there will be an FBI raid on J.D. Kane's ranch, he said, as if commenting on the weather. It seems they received an anonymous tip about environmental crimes and tax evasion. It's going to be a big operation with search and seizure warrants. George stared at him dumbfounded. How do you know that? Let's just say I have well-informed contacts, Ethan replied. Avoiding Sarah's inquisitive gaze, the operation happened exactly as he had predicted. Before noon, J.D. Kane was being led in handcuffs to an FBI vehicle, while computers, documents, and weapons were seized from his property. The news spread through the town like wildfire, and for the first time in years, the small-time farmers and ranchers of the region breathed a sigh of relief. But Sarah wasn't relieved. She was confused, intrigued, and beginning to connect dots that formed a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see. That night, she showed up at the house Ethan was renting, holding Yasmin in her arms. He opened the door with a smile that died when he saw the serious expression on her face. "We need to talk," she said, entering without waiting for an invitation. "Of course, want some coffee? Water? I want the truth." Sarah sat in the simple living room, adjusting Yasmin in her lap. "Who are you really, Ethan?" He sat down across from her, his hands nervous. "I am who I've always been with you. A man who just happens to predict FBI raids, who speaks at least 3 languages, who has well-informed contacts capable of taking down a corrupt baron in a matter of hours." Sarah stared at him directly. "I may be from the country, but I'm not stupid. Who are you?" Ethan was silent for a long moment, struggling internally. Finally, he sighed deeply. "My full name is Ethan Al-Mansouri. I'm the heir to one of the largest oil fortunes in the Middle East. My family controls oil fields in Kuwait and has investments in dozens of countries. I am very rich, Sarah. Very." She stared at him, processing the information. "How much is very rich?" "A few billion dollars," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Yasmin slept peacefully in Sarah's lap, oblivious to the fact that her mother's world had just been turned upside down. "Billions," Sarah repeated, her voice strange. "And you're here, in a town of 10,000 people, renting a 2-bedroom house, drinking coffee at Joe's Diner." "I'm here because this is where you are," Ethan said, the raw honesty in his voice. "Because for the first time in my life I found something real, something worth more than all the money in the world." "And why did you lie? Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning?" Ethan stood up, beginning to pace the small room. "Because my whole life, people only see the money when they look at me. Women who feign love for personal gain, friends who are actually parasites, family members who only seek me out when they need something. When I found you on that road, when you looked at me as if I were just a man trying to help, it was the first time anyone had truly seen me." "But you lied," she insisted, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "How can I trust someone who lied about something so fundamental?" "I didn't lie about who I am here with you. I didn't lie about my feelings for you. I didn't lie about wanting to protect you and Yasmin. Didn't you?" Sarah stood up, holding her daughter firmly. "Then tell me something, Ethan Al-Mansouri. A man with billions of dollars could have solved all my family's problems with a simple bank transfer. Why did you choose to stay here, acting out a simple life? Was it just a game for you, a fantasy of how the poor live?" The accusation hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. "No, it was never like that. I stayed because..." "Because why? Because it was fun to play at being common? Because it was exciting to have a poor, grateful girlfriend?" "Because I fell in love with you," he shouted, his composure finally breaking. "Because every day by your side is the first day I've ever woken up happy. Because when you smile at me, when you hold my hand, when you look at me like I'm a hero, I feel richer than all the oil in the world has ever made me feel." Sarah stopped, the tears now streaming freely down her cheeks. "And I fell in love with Ethan, the businessman who appeared in my life when I needed him most. I don't know who Ethan Al-Mansouri, the billionaire, is. I don't know if I can trust him." "I'm the same person," he said, approaching slowly. "The same man who held your hand in the hospital, who sings to Yasmin in Arabic, who argues with your father about football. The money doesn't change that." "It changes everything," she replied, stepping back. "It changes because you chose to hide a fundamental part of who you are from me. It changes because now I wonder if every moment we spent together was genuine or just an act." "Sarah, please. I need to think," she said, heading for the door. "I need to understand what this means, what we mean." "And while you're thinking?" he asked, despair clear in his voice. She paused at the door without turning back. "While I'm thinking, maybe it's best you go back to your billionaire world. This one might be too simple for someone like you." And with that, she left, leaving Ethan alone in the small house that suddenly seemed larger and emptier than any mansion he had ever inhabited. The 3 months that followed were the longest of Ethan's life. He returned to Dallas as Sarah had suggested, but the luxurious mansion that was once his refuge now felt like a suffocating golden prison. Every business meeting, every social event, every moment of his former routine was a painful reminder of how empty his life was before he met her. He plunged obsessively into his work, expanding his investments in American agribusiness as a way to stay connected to the land that had transformed him. But nothing filled the void that Sarah and Yasmin had left in his heart. On lonely nights, he would look at the photos he had secretly saved. Sarah smiling while breastfeeding Yasmin, the little one sleeping in his arms, the 3 of them together on the porch of the simple house that for a few weeks had been paradise on earth. He had offered discreet protection to the Miller family through intermediaries, ensuring that J.D. Kane, now imprisoned awaiting trial, could cause no more trouble. But it didn't ease the constant pain of having lost the love of his life, for not having the courage to be completely honest from the start. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled to rebuild her life, focusing on caring for Yasmin and working as a nurse at the town's clinic. Her days were filled with medical routines and maternal duties, but the nights were a torment of questions and longing. She had pushed Ethan out of her life because she felt betrayed, but in the silent hours of the early morning, as she rocked Yasmin to sleep, she couldn't stop thinking about the security she felt in his arms, the kindness in his eyes, the way he made her feel like the most important woman in the world. George watched his daughter waste away day after day, seeing how she smiled less, how her eyes lost the sparkle they had gained during those months of happiness. He tried several times to talk about Ethan, but Sarah would change the subject or walk away, unable to speak about the man she still loved but didn't know if she could trust. It was on a March morning, when Yasmin turned 6 months old, that everything changed devastatingly. The baby woke up with a high fever and convulsions that sent Sarah into an absolute panic. The local clinic had no resources to handle such a severe pediatric emergency, and the regional hospital in Abilene had a full neonatal ICU. Yasmin urgently needed specialized care in Dallas or Austin, but there was no ambulance available and private transport would take too long. With a broken heart and her pride completely set aside, Sarah made the call she swore she would never make. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number Ethan had left just for emergencies, and when she heard his voice on the other end of the line, all her resistance collapsed. "Ethan," she managed to say through sobs, "it's Yasmin. She's very sick. She needs help urgently." He asked no questions, demanded no explanations, wasted no time on resentment. "Where are you?" "At the clinic in Red Rock Springs." "Hold on. I'll have a medical helicopter there in 2 hours. I'm already on my way." Ethan didn't lie. In less than 2 hours, a medical rescue helicopter landed on the town's football field, equipped with a mobile ICU and a team of specialized pediatricians from Dallas. Ethan jumped out of the aircraft before the rotors had completely stopped, running toward the clinic where Sarah was waiting with Yasmin in her arms, her daughter now semi-conscious and breathing irregularly. "How is she?" he asked, quickly examining the pale face of the baby he considered his own. "Viral meningitis," the local doctor explained quickly. "She needs intensive care urgently." "Then let's go," Ethan said, helping Sarah into the helicopter. "The best pediatricians in the country are waiting at Dallas Presbyterian Hospital." During the tense flight to Dallas, Ethan held Sarah's hand as the medical team worked frantically to stabilize Yasmin. He said nothing about the months of separation, about the hurt or the wounded pride. He was just there, solid as a rock, offering the strength and support she needed in the most desperate moment of her life as a mother. At the hospital, Ethan used all his influence to ensure Yasmin received the best treatment available. He stayed in the room during all the tests, held Sarah when she collapsed in tears at the sight of her daughter connected to tubes and monitors, and whispered prayers in Arabic, asking Allah to protect the child who had become his world. It was 5 days and 4 nights of constant vigil. Sarah never left her daughter's side, and Ethan never left Sarah's. He brought clean clothes, food she barely touched, and simply stayed there, offering a silent presence when words were not enough. On the 3rd night, when Yasmin finally showed signs of improvement, Sarah collapsed from exhaustion in his arms. "Thank you," she whispered, nestled against the chest she knew so well. "Thank you for not hesitating, for being here." "I will always be here when you need me," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "Always." "Ethan," she pulled away to look into his eyes. "I need to apologize. You saved my daughter again, and I sent you away out of pride, out of fear. You don't need to apologize. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." "No," she shook her head. I understand now why you didn't. And I understand that the money doesn't change who you are here, with me, with her. You proved that by coming today, by dropping everything to help us without asking for anything in return. When Yasmin was discharged a week later, fully recovered, Sarah made a decision that would change their lives forever. Instead of returning immediately to Red Rock Springs, she accepted Ethan's invitation to stay at his house in Dallas during the baby's recovery period. The mansion Sarah had expected to find no longer existed. In its place, Ethan had transformed the space into something warm and familiar. Photos of the three of them decorated the main walls. A crib was set up next to the bed in the master bedroom, and the gigantic kitchen had been reorganized to have an intimate corner where a small family could share homemade meals. "You've changed everything," she observed, amazed. "I have," he admitted, "because I learned that a house only becomes a home when the right people are inside it." That night, after Yasmin fell asleep in her new crib, they finally talked about everything that had happened. Ethan told her about the loneliness of the months apart, about how he had rethought his priorities, about his decision to use his wealth not to impress, but to build something meaningful. Sarah spoke of the fear she had felt, of how she had realized that true love wasn't about material equality, but about an equality of commitment and dedication. "I love you," she said, finally letting the words come out without fear. "I love Ethan, the man who saved me on the road. I love Ethan, the businessman who wanted to know my family. And I love Ethan Al-Mansouri, the billionaire who renounced his pride to save my daughter." "And I love you," he replied, holding her face between his hands. "I love your strength, your honesty, your ability to make me want to be a better man. I love how you care for Yasmin, how you face life head-on, how you make a simple house in the country feel more luxurious than any palace." The kiss that sealed this declaration was different from the first. It carried no hesitation or urgency, but the deep certainty of two people who had weathered storms and chosen to stay together. 6 months later, they married in a ceremony that mixed Arab and American traditions in the small church of Red Rock Springs. Ethan had used part of his fortune to create a sustainable rural development project in the region, providing education, healthcare, and economic opportunities for families like the Millers. Sarah coordinated the project's health department, finally realizing her dream of improving medical conditions in the region where she was born. Yasmin, now a healthy, smiling toddler, was the flower girl, carrying the rings on a small pillow embroidered with symbols from the two countries that represented her unique family. During the ceremony, when the pastor asked if Ethan took Sarah to be his wife, he answered in Arabic and then translated for everyone to hear, "I do for all of time, in all the storms and joys that life may bring." The reception was simple but joyous, held in the backyard of the Miller property, with country music mixed with Arabic melodies, regional food alongside typical Middle Eastern dishes. The guests were a surprising mix of local farmers, Dallas businessmen, and even some of Ethan's relatives who came from Kuwait specifically to meet the woman who had transformed the family's rebellious heir into a truly happy man. George, in a toast to the newlyweds, perfectly summarized the journey that had brought them there. "Sometimes God puts angels in our lives when we least expect it. Ethan appeared on our road like a saving angel, and Sarah taught him that the greatest treasure isn't in bank vaults, but in the heart of a family you choose to love every day." Years later, when Yasmin called Ethan Baba in Arabic and Dad in English with equal affection, when younger siblings ran through the yard of the house they built between the town and the ranch, when the social project had transformed the lives of hundreds of families in the region, Sarah and Ethan looked back and knew that true love had triumphed over all differences and obstacles. They had proven that love knows no social boundaries when it is based on truth, mutual respect, and the daily decision to choose each other, regardless of the storms that life may bring. And every night, when they put their children to bed, Ethan would whisper the same prayer of gratitude he had made in the hospital that terrible night. Thank you for putting that extraordinary woman in his path, turning a chance encounter on a dusty road into the love of a lifetime. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.